Now, the few other things I want to look at here, well, we looked at some of the roles and we added the file services role. If I go to nodes, I see both servers actually show up. If we click on storage, well, we just looked at that. The disks pull the enclosure. If I go to the networks, I'm going to click on this cluster network 1. Now, in failover clustering, generally you would have multiple network adapters in your system. This first option, allow cluster network communication on this network. So my cluster network 1, which is my 192.168.1 adapter, allows cluster traffic between the nodes in the cluster. Now with this, you would call this a private network if that is the only traffic allowed on it. So imagine you have a second network adapter, and that second network adapter only passes cluster traffic. But if your server only has one network adapter total, then it has to pass network traffic from your end users and cluster traffic. If that's true, you have to select allow clients to connect through this network as well. So now you would call that private and public. Private would be the cluster traffic. Public would be the clients connecting to it. The third option, do not allow cluster network communication on this network. Now, you would only choose that if you have a dedicated network adapter that you want clients to connect to. You would select this for that network. Then for the other network that you want the cluster traffic to pass through, you would select the top one and you would deselect the allow clients to connect. So just managed if you had multiple networks. Now I'm going to cancel that. I only have one network adapter, so we're not changing any of those things. Now, if I go back to nodes, a few things you can do at the node level. It asks me if I want to drain or do I not want to drain a role. If you drain a role, what that means, if users are connected to this server right now and you pause and you select drain roles, those users will not be disconnected. It'll continue processing whatever those users are actually doing, but it accepts no new connections. Once the users that are currently connected, once they've all disconnected, it then goes to a complete paused state. If you select do not drain, it just pauses. So that's going to disrupt and cut off your users that are currently connected. So almost always you would drain the roles. This is something you would do in your maintenance window. Like if I know Saturday night we're going to install updates on this, then you would drain the roles so it's not disruptive to your users. When all the users are connected, then you would have the updates installed, server would reboot. Pretty fascinating. And well, if we right click that again, you'll see there's an option to resume. So if you did pause and you want to start again, you can resume. And if I go to the more, now sometimes this window is a little weird where it like disappears when you scroll over certain things. Seems to be just a glitch in Server 2019. But you have the same options over here. So if I go to the more actions here, you'll see there is also an option to evict. If I want to remove a node from the cluster entirely, maybe we're done with RTS Serve 2. I don't want it to be in this cluster anymore. You just evict and it just takes that node out of your cluster. Pretty fascinating. Now, the other options we care about. At the cluster level, if I go to more actions, you'll see there is an option for cluster aware updating. Now, we have nothing to configure for this, but what cluster aware updating actually does is allows me to schedule updates that will install on the cluster. So it's not something you can really see. It's more how it works. I can apply updates to this cluster. When I do that, RTS Serve 1 would pause and drain. So it would not disrupt users, but accepts no new connections. It would then install all the updates, reboot if necessary. Once it reboots, it'll connect back to the cluster. Once it's connected back to the cluster after the updates have installed, RTS Serve 2 would pause and drain itself, and then it would load all the updates, would reboot. So this just kind of goes in this hop-along fashion, one server at a time, but it can be a completely automated process, the cluster-aware updating. So very neat. That's been an option since Server 2012, so not new and pretty common. Well, if we go back to more actions again, If you wanted to manage the cluster quorum settings we talked about, now normally you don't, because this is going to use a dynamic quorum and self-manage. But if I wanted to, you could go through and select the default quorum configuration. I'm already using that. If you wanted to handpick a quorum witness, you could do that. If you wanted a disk witness, file share we talked about, an Azure Cloud witness, you could go through that configuration. But the recommendation is to use the default quorum configuration, which is automatically set up when you just configure your cluster. So unlikely we're making any changes to that. Pretty straightforward configuration of our failover cluster.